What's up, guys? Hey, listen, welcome back to House of Zula. Glad to have you as always. We're doing something a little bit different today. We're not working on our 79 Project Ego Brews, which I'm sad, but there's a good reason. We're working on the 86 today. All right, I got the old 86 moved way up. Little 79 coupe's taking a back seat right now. It's being used as a car cover. Don't worry though, I'm getting right back to that. Still have tons of metal work to do on it. But back to the 86, we've got get this thing way up in the air. So as you can see, I've got it lifted up way up high here. Give myself plenty of room to get that transmission dropped down. Now I did go ahead and start removing some of the interior. Got the center console moved back out of the way so I can get the shifter boot out. Get the MGW shifter removed and just make myself room so I can drop this down. So that's super easy. Just a couple of screws just to be able to lift this thing up and take up the boot and get it dropped down without having to remove all the gauges. So that's cool. On the other side, I did go ahead and remove the electrical connections, the speedometer cable. Luckily, I was able to remove a section of the exhaust here where my exhaust cutout is, and that really helps out having a single turbo exhaust versus two going to an H pipe, because typically your H or X pipe will cross right over your transmission, right behind it. So this helps out a lot that you've just got one single turbo pipe. So I went ahead and moved that midsection. So now really all we have to do is just get to the transmission itself and pull it out. So the TKO is sitting there. Like I said, I got this used $2,000, and back over here we have our spec clutch here and there. We do have to change the clutch out. I can't use my McLeod clutch because the spline count is different. I believe it's like a 26 spline. And also I have another flywheel, but I don't think I'll need it. I think I should be able to use the flywheel that's on my car now. And I've also got the bell house. Now the bell house is, now I'll get to all this, guys. We'll get to all the nitty gritty, all the conversion details. This car is 100% bone stock as far as the T5 goes. I've swapped it out once before, but this is obviously a T5 car. So you do need a couple things to convert your car from a T5 to a T56 or a TKO 500 or 600. In this case, it's a TKO 600. So I've got the cross member as well, and if you saw that or not, the cross member is absolutely neat. I think it's a UPR piece. And then I've got, of course, the bell house that's needed. So the bell house pattern, of course, is the same to the small block Ford, but it is different here. They're slightly offset compared to a T5. You can actually convert these. I'll go over that as well. Takes some work though, but that's it. I'm gonna see you guys when this transmission is out. This is not a video on how to remove a transmission by any means. This is just a video of us getting a TKO installed before Fox Fest. I got 2 weeks. Okay, I don't think I'm gonna have to remove the safety loop, which is cool. And I've got an extra yoke here. It all depends on how I get the transmission back, and get it back between this. I should be able to. I don't think it's gonna be that way, but I got an extra yoke. It should be the same spline. Here we go. I'm gonna stick in here just to help keep fluid levels down. All right, a lot of the fluid's probably gonna come out of the speedometer hole, but this will help keep it down. A little zip tie trick here. If you have an extra yoke, this is perfect. Okay, transmission's been removed. Now we gotta remove the bell house so we can get to the clutch, remove it from the flywheel. I'll show you guys the transmission later. There's some trash parts on it. So yeah, we're gonna remove the starter because it's obviously sandwiching itself between the flywheel and the bell house. You can't remove the bell house, of course, but removing the transmission like this, of course, is gonna get you much easier access to your bell house bolts. So yeah, I'm gonna remove the starter, get it out of the way, and then we'll remove the 5 bolts for the bell house. I think it's 5, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6. And then we'll get the clutch off of the car. Get ready to install the spec clutch. Yeah, there we go. All right. All right, I got the clutch and flywheel out, and let's take a look at this together. First, let's look at the flywheel. Now remember, this is coming off of my 86 car that is an on-3 turbo car, making somewhere, in the 4-ish plus, horsepower range. But this is only got probably about, I don't know, 3,000, maybe 4,000 miles on it. If you guys go back and watch some of the earlier videos, we installed this clutch before the turbo was put on, whenever we put the motor in about 3 years ago. And then I since added the turbo to it, and then put in heavy duty clutch, So this is a McLeod clutch that's rated, I think, for, oh my gosh, I think it's rated for 500 or 600 foot-pounds of torque. Way more than, the motor's putting out. So either way though, this billet Ford Racing flywheel is a made in America billet steel flywheel, and it is absolutely just completely overheated. And not only that, it's grooved, so I can definitely feel the grooves in here. So it's definitely heat. So now I think this can actually be resurfaced because there's no hairline cracks that I can tell, but there is definitely some heat that has been put in this. I cannot believe this flywheel looks the way it does look. I'm pretty surprised actually. So that's that. Let's look at the clutch now. The clutch matches the flywheel. So this is, like I said, this is a McLeod pressure plate here, and this thing has got the same kind of heat mark. Now this doesn't actually feel as grooved as the flywheel does, but the clutch itself, you can definitely see the bluing on it, especially on the inner pucks here, which is, it's from me driving the crap out of it. So I definitely, punch it. But here's my theory. So this is all not right in my opinion. This clutch is made to handle more horsepower and torque than that motor's really putting out. I don't slip it, and it's not like I'm, feathering it. But here's the deal. I think this is the cause of all of it. This doesn't engage and disengage. I started noticing that the car itself didn't feel like it was transitioning from first to second very smoothly. It's always been jerky. I really blamed it on the tune. I adjusted the tune a lot of times trying to fix it, but the transition from stop to a go in first was always like, just hard. Like it was an on-off switch. And I thought maybe the clutch. It got worse after I took it to Foxfest last year's drag racing. That's when I really started noticing getting worse. I never heard noise from this, surprisingly, but I think what was happening is clearly, man, this is spinning, and it was spinning to the point where, this is wallowed out on the bearing retainer. So the bearing retainer on the T5 here is made of aluminum, okay? From Ford. They do make an upgraded one. Now this should have been upgraded when I had the transmission out the first time. Didn't really think it was going to be that much of an issue, but what you really want to do is upgrade these where it has the aluminum unit and a steel bearing retainer, so that it doesn't wear out like this. This is not only gouged from wear and tear, but it's also gouged from heat, excessive heat. You could tell that it's almost melted the aluminum from heat. So that's heat marks to me, which ruin the bearing, which means it's also ruined. Anyways, the on and off of the clutch itself, I really do think was causing this slippage. I don't think maybe I was engaging all the way, all the time, especially from a stop, and causing excessive slip. That being said, there's really no telling how much horsepower loss I was getting in this, because this to me looks like clutch slippage more than it does, just excessive horsepower. So either way, I went ahead and bought a new billet flywheel. Yes, this probably could be saved and resurfaced. I don't really have the time. Summit Racing is down the street from me, so I went ahead and purchased a new billet Ford Racing flywheel. It's identical to this one. So it's a 50 ounce, of course, for the motor, and this guy is 230 something, I think. So 200 and some change. All right, so let's get to the meat and potatoes on why you guys are here. What does it take to swap your T5 with a TKO? So right here, I've got a T5 on the right-hand side and a TKO on the left-hand side. Now the TKO comes in two different variants, the TKO 500 and the 600. The number just indicates the torque rating that these are rated at. The TR3550 is actually a line that was replaced by the TKO and is a similar 5-speed transmission. So the TKOs came out, they replaced the TR3550 transmissions, but they were also a 5-speed. Now if you're looking at a 6-speed replacement for our Fox Mustangs here, you'll probably be looking at a T56, which I believe are in the neighborhood of 450 all the way up to 700 foot-pound of torque rating, depending on what model you get and what the input spline count is. The Viper model of a T56, if we had one here, would have had a 30 spline input shaft, which is I think rated at 700 foot-pounds of torque, so it's pretty beefy. But for all purposes, we're not talking about the 6-speed. We're focusing on the 5-speed variants here, which is going to be the TR3550, the TKO 500, and the TKO 600. That is the most common swap to replace your T5 with here. So let's look at them dimensionally. So right off the bat, you can see clearly they're not the same. The TKO here, this is a 600, so this is a 600 foot-pound capable transmission that I've got here. It's clearly wider, and not only is it wider and beefier, it's got a much stronger ribbed casing on it as well, but the transmission is also significantly heavier, and we're talking about 30 or 40 pounds heavier than the T5 here. I believe these are between 65 and 70 pounds dry, and these are closer to 90 pounds and up, to 99 pounds dry. So this is closer to 100, this is closer to 70 if you just round it up, I guess. So it is going to be heavier, but of course you're going to get the extra torque rating. So what makes this transmission so much stronger? One is just the casing of it, the way that it's built. It has a 3-rail shift mechanism versus a single rail, which does change the shift notchiness feel of it, because this is actually a 3-rail system. You can see here, 1, 2, and 3, versus a single rail going through your T5 here, but it also helps increase the strength. Along that, you've got a larger output spline and you have a larger input spline. As you can clearly see here, the input spline on a Tremec TKO 500 or 600 is going to be a 26 spline. This is why you have to change the clutch out, for this reason and this reason only. Now you can get a TKO 500 and a 10 spline, but keep in mind you really are kind of reducing the torque rating from going from a 10 spline or going back to a 10 spline like a T5 has, because the bigger splines is just really equals a weaker shaft than the smaller, more higher count of splines. And you can also see the retainer itself is quite a bit beefier than it is over here in a T5. So again, like I mentioned, from the factory of the T5, this is aluminum retainer bearing for your throwout bearing, and this one is steel. So this one's already upgraded to the steel one. That's cool. That is how they are built. They have a steel retainer bearing. That's much helpful, of course. And like I said before, if you're running any kind of horsepower or any kind of higher clutch on your T5, you should go ahead and upgrade your retainer bearing to a steel one to get away to keep this from happening right here. All right, also you may notice my unit came with a drive shaft. It is not because of the length difference, it's because the output shaft spline difference for the yoke is also changing. So again, I'll have to look up exactly what spline is, but this is the spline count for a TKO output shaft, and this is the spline count for a T5 output shaft. What that means is you have to either get a different yoke and replace it on your existing drive shaft, or in this case, the guy just gave me the aluminum drive shaft, so I'm going to use it. So now I've got this aluminum drive shaft and the original back in the corner aluminum drive shaft I had on my T5. Let's go out back. Now you can see mine is clearly hung onto a drive shaft here. So when I purchased this transmission, of course it came with a tri-ax shifter, which is cool, but it also came with the drive shaft and the clutch and everything I need to convert this. So the reason why it comes with a drive shaft is because the output spline on your yoke is different. This has a 30, and I believe this is, I don't know, 26 or 28 on a T5. But anyways, the output spline on a TKO is higher, it is a different output spline, so therefore you need to change your yoke. Now the drive shaft length, from my understanding, is the same. I'll have to measure it with the one up there, but it's from my understanding that the length of the drive shaft is the same, and technically if I didn't have this, I could just change out to the correct yoke and use the drive shaft I've got and not have any problems at all. But keep that in mind, you do have a different yoke you need to change out here, or in my case, you have a whole drive shaft just meant for the TKO for a Fox length. But keep that in mind. So same goes true for the input shaft again. That's why you have to have a different clutch, is because the input shaft again is higher. What else do you need to swap this out? Well, dimensionally they are a little bit different, so you do have to have a different K member. Now, you could probably modify your existing to make it work. You can see the ears on here where they're located on a TKO is quite a bit further back than they are on the T5. And we're looking at maybe 1.5 or 2 inches difference from the ear here to right there for your cross member. So the cross member has to be changed out. There's plenty of companies who make cross member conversions to swap your T5 to a T56 Magnum 3550 or TKO, okay? And on top of that, you also have to get a bell house, because the ears right here. So the spacing on a TKO versus a T5 is going to be out further. It's moved out because the spacing is different. You cannot bolt a standard T5 bell house straight to your TKO and just rock it. I got two bell houses here. The one on the left is for the TKO. The one on the right is for the T5. You can see, if you can look at it and just barely, that there are variances in the mounting locations. Now, interestingly, they have provisionings here on a stock. This is a stock, and I mean this is an E6 ZR part number from Ford. So this is a stock T5 bell that came on my Mustang. It has, interestingly, provisioning here for the outer ears that would match a TKO, okay? That's pretty cool. These two over here doesn't have provisioning, but it is absolutely, more like here and more like right here. So all four bolts move out. When I said actually earlier before, you can convert these, you can, it just takes a lot of work. And you'd have to, make sure you drill out these provisionings in the exact spots. A lot of guys will actually weld fill these with aluminum, and then, make sure these are drilled out, mark these as a template, and then drill and tap the outer side on the right-hand side bosses. So they came down, otherwise everything's the same. Your starter location's the same, small block Ford bell house, pattern of course, and your clutch cable location is the same, as well as your fork location here, okay? So that's one thing you do have to have. Now this is true with a TKO or T56 Magnum, same pattern. So you can get these aftermarket. I believe this is just a regular aftermarket aluminum piece. Of course, you can go all the way up to a scatter shield, or you can also get a Ford piece as well. I don't think this is a Ford piece, but it may be. I don't know. It doesn't matter. We're using it. Okay, the electrical connections up front here on a T5 is your neutral safety switch. It's right up front. It has a connector in it and a pigtail that looks like this. On a TKO, it is out back here, and it is the same connection, but you can see it right here in the back of the tail shaft. So the position of the neutral safety switch has changed. Your reverse light switch is right here on the side. Now, typically this has a pigtail that just plugs into here and has a plug that goes into the harness in your car. On a TKO, it's really in the same spot right here on the side. Now, my pigtail, I just pulled it off the transmission, so whenever the transmission goes back in the car, we'll simply just plug that back in. There are two different variants of the pigtail from what I understand. And here it is right here. The transmission came with this reverse sensor pigtail, and this is the plug I'm talking about that will plug into right there on the side of the transmission, and this goes through the body of the car or the harness. This is a smaller plug. My car being 86 has the fatter plug. It's like this big. So no big deal. You don't have to cut any wires, guys. Just pull this off the side of the transmission and use yours and plug it right into there, okay? Aside from that, you got your speedometer sensor, which goes into here. Now, mine is just dangling on the car. I pulled it out, and I pulled the whole sensor out with it. So it's dangling on the car, but on the TKO, it's in the same spot, and it's the same sensor with the same exact plug, so it's pretty much ready to go. Now this also has another sensor on the side right there, which I believe is a additional speed sensor for maybe aftermarket ECUs or possibly a electronic speedometer or something. While we're up top, let's look at the shifters. Now I know, sorry guys, if you're like me, you spent money on a pretty awesome MGW shifter. This is only going to work on a T45 or T5 transmission and cannot carry over. Clearly because the bolt pattern is different. This is a 6 bolt pattern versus a 4, and it's completely different shape and size. So that is it. Starting from the front, you need a bell house to make up for the different bolt pattern in the transmissions from your T5 to your TKO or T56 or your T30 or 3550. You need a different clutch, or in this case, a clutch plate. You don't necessarily have to change your pressure plate. You could also technically keep your pressure plate and go out and buy yourself a 26 spline friction pad. You could do that as well. You also need to change out your yoke because of the spline difference, or in this case, your drive shaft, and you need to change out your cross member because the spacing and dimensions are going to change on the transmissions. But otherwise, that's it. There's 1,000 companies who make exactly what we're trying to do here. They all support it. It's not hard. There's a ton of articles on it, so just go look them up, and there's plenty of things to read on the internet about doing the swap. It's real common, it's real easy, and we're going to beef up the torque rating from our measly T5 here with a 250 foot-pound torque rating to our TKO's Grando 600 foot-pound torque rating. All right, listen, that's it for this video. I've already got the flywheel installed, I've got the clutch installed, I have the bell house installed, I have the start installed, and the only thing left is to put in this TKO in it right now. I'm gonna get to it right now, but you're gonna have to wait till part 2 to see that and to see us test drive and break it in and all other stuff. So that's coming up in part 2, so stay tuned for that. If you like the content though, do subscribe. It does help me out a little bit. If it's helping you out anyway and you want to see more content, make sure to subscribe. It lets me know that you like what I'm doing and I can keep doing this. Also follow me on Instagram. If you do that, you'll get a little bit behind the scenes, a little bit more detailed information on the things I'm doing here before it comes out to you on YouTube, which is kind of cool. Sometimes you'll see some some different scenes, different things I'm working on. That's not all on YouTube. But anyways, check that out if you want to. Otherwise, keep wrenching on your Fox bodies, guys. Remember, it's just a car. Don't take it too seriously. Go out there and have fun with them, and we'll see you on part 2.